The debris field log was still running when Commodore Velsarith found it. Not the battle record, not the tactical archive, just a small automated buoy spinning in a slow ellipse around nothing, broadcasting a timestamp and a sound, a low, rhythmic vibration that her instruments could not classify. It was not an alarm. It was not a distress signal. It was not any frequency the hegemony's acoustic library recognized across 4,000 years of cataloged communication. It sounded almost like breathing. The buoy was the only object within 11 light minutes of the coordinates where the Armada had been. 47,000 ships. Gone. And the only thing broadcasting from that region of space was this small human-made object, cycling a sound that her entire science division had now spent 6 days trying to categorize, and had labeled, finally, with a single inadequate word. Deliberate. Someone had left it there on purpose. That was all they knew. That, and the fact that it was still transmitting, which meant someone expected it to be heard. Velsarith stared at the buoy on her display and felt the specific cold that comes not from danger, but from realizing you have fundamentally misunderstood something. She had not yet asked the most important question. She would not ask it for another 3 days. When she finally did, the answer would end her career, collapse the hegemony's intelligence directorate, and force the Grand Council to convene for the first time in 200 years in full emergency session. The question was simple. When did the humans know we were coming? 17 months earlier, Fleet Admiral Oran Dasek had stood before the Grand Council and used a word no hegemony officer had employed in recorded history when describing an enemy military capability. The word was negligible. Their total capital ship count is negligible, he said. Their defensive grid is negligible. Their response doctrine based on every intercepted communication is negligible. He paused, letting the weight of consensus settle over the chamber. They are a young species. They have been spacefaring for less than 3 centuries. They have not fought a war in 40 years. What they have is enthusiasm. What they lack is everything else. The Council had voted unanimously. The humans had colonized 11 systems that the hegemony had already designated as interior expansion territory. They had been warned 4 times through official channels. They had responded each time with what Dasek's translation team described as asterisk politely worded refusals asterisk, which the Council found baffling, then irritating, then, finally, insulting. The Armada was not assembled to destroy humanity. That was a critical detail the historical record would later struggle with, because the outcome made the distinction feel absurd. It was assembled to demonstrate. 47,000 ships, the largest coordinated fleet action in hegemony history, the largest, in fact, in any recorded galactic history across the 6 major civilizations, and the 11 associate members of the broader coalition of developed worlds. The plan was to enter human space, park the Armada at the edge of their most populated system, and transmit a single message. You have 48 hours to begin withdrawal proceedings from all 11 contested systems. Nobody expected a fight. Dasek had been explicit about this. They will comply, he told his senior staff. Rational species comply when presented with overwhelming force. This is not a war. This is arithmetic. His science liaison, a young junior analyst named Pretosvin, had raised her hand at that briefing. Dasek had nodded at her with the particular expression that senior officers wear when they are prepared to be patient. "Sir," she said, "the humans haven't responded to 4 diplomatic warnings. What makes us confident they'll respond to a 5th, even with the fleet present?" Dasek had smiled. Because the first 4 warnings didn't have 47,000 ships behind them. Pretosvin had written a note in her personal log that evening. The note said, "I don't think that's how they think." She did not say this out loud again for 11 months. By then, the Armada was gone, and everyone was finally willing to listen. The journey to human space took 6 weeks. This was itself unusual. The hegemony had fought 17 military campaigns in the last 2 centuries, and in every case, the targeted civilization had detected the fleet within days of departure and begun immediate negotiation. Space was not silent. A fleet of 47,000 ships moving in formation generated gravitational wake signatures, radiation blooms, and electromagnetic scatter that any civilization with functional sensors could detect from several light-years away. The humans detected the Armada on day 4 of its journey. Dasek received confirmation of this through intercepted human military communications. He considered it good news. The demonstration was working already. Any species that rational, monitoring the approach of this much force, would be on the diplomatic channels within days. The humans were not on the diplomatic channels within days. They were on their own channels, in their own language, having conversations that the hegemony's translation AI struggled with because. And this was the first indication that something was wrong. A significant portion of the intercepted communications were jokes. Not mistranslations, not idiom failures, jokes. The humans were transmitting humor to each other about the approaching Armada. Pratasvin flagged this. Her superior told her the translation matrix was probably miscalibrated. She ran it 3 more times. The results were consistent. She flagged it again. Lieutenant Pratasvin, her superior said with careful patience, 47,000 ships are approaching their home system. They are not joking. Recalibrate the matrix. I've run it 9 times, sir. Then run it a 10th. She ran it a 10th. One intercepted transmission, sent from a human military installation on the 4th planet of their home system to a command ship somewhere in the outer belt, read, after 10 separate translation attempts, as follows. Tell the Admiral the guests are early. Nobody panic. We haven't finished setting the table. Pratasvin stared at that line for a long time. Then she wrote in her log, they're not afraid. I don't understand why they're not afraid. That scares me more than anything else about this assignment. Week 3 of the approach, something changed. The human military communications went quiet. Not reduced, not encrypted to a higher standard. Quiet. A near-total cessation of detectable signal traffic across every frequency the hegemony's intelligence apparatus monitored. After 2 days of silence, Dasek convened a staff meeting. Options, he said. His intelligence chief spoke first. Psychological preparation. They've gone to internal communication protocols to prevent further intelligence leakage. Standard pre-conflict doctrine. They're preparing to fight, Dasek frowned. With what? With whatever they have, sir. 38 capital ships by last count. Perhaps they intend a symbolic defense. Symbolic, Dasek let the word sit. Against 47,000. Species facing existential pressure sometimes behave in ways that are strategically irrational, sir. Dasek nodded slowly. This matched his models. A cornered civilization might commit to a suicidal last gesture not because it was logical but because it felt necessary. He had accommodated for this in his operational planning. We hold formation at distance. We do not fire first under any circumstances. If they engage, we absorb it. Let them exhaust themselves against us. Then we transmit the ultimatum. Yes, sir. The silence from the human side continued for 9 more days. It was, the intelligence team noted, a very organized silence. Signal discipline at this level required coordination across dozens of planets and thousands of installations. That level of coordination pointed to a command structure operating in pre-planned lockdown mode. What they did not consider was the other reason a species might go quiet. They were so focused on why the humans might be afraid that they forgot to ask whether the silence was something else entirely, whether it was the sound of something being built. The Armada arrived at the outer edge of the human home system on day 41. Dasek stood on the bridge of his flagship, the unbroken will asterisk, and looked at the tactical display. 47,000 ships arranged in the hegemony's standard demonstration formation, a sphere 7 light minutes in diameter, perfectly calibrated to be visible from the inner planets without constituting a direct orbital threat. Every ship held position. Every weapon system was cold. This was, by design, a sight that should produce only one response in any rational species capable of comprehending it. "Transmit the message," Dasek said. The message went out on all frequencies, in 18 languages including 3 different human dialects. "You have 48 hours to begin withdrawal proceedings." The Armada waited. 12 minutes passed. A response came back. Pretosvin was the one who translated it, because she was the fastest and she'd been awake for 31 hours anticipating this moment. She read the incoming text twice. Then she read it a third time. Then she walked to Dasek's command station, and she placed her translation pad on the console in front of him without saying anything. Dasek read it. He read it again. The message said, "Thank you for your transmission. We note your arrival. The 48-hour window is appreciated. Could you confirm whether this window begins from time of transmission or time of receipt? We want to make sure we're working from the same clock." Admiral Chen, Terran Defense Command. The bridge was very quiet for a long moment. "They're stalling," Dasek's intelligence chief said. "Classic negotiation delay tactic." "Are they?" Pretosvin said quietly. Her superior shot her a look. She fell silent. But she was thinking, no, they're not stalling. They asked a specific question about a specific clock. They're measuring something. They want to know exactly how much time they have. She did not say this out loud. She should have. 22 hours into the 48-hour window, the human fleet appeared. Not from the inner planets. Not from any of the positions the hegemony's sensors had been monitoring. They came from the asteroid belt, specifically from 17 different points distributed throughout the belt's densest region, a zone the hegemony had assessed as too navigationally hazardous for military staging. 38 ships, exactly as the intelligence estimates had said. They arranged themselves in a loose formation at the inner edge of the sphere, 11 light minutes from the Armada's nearest vessels. Dasek looked at the display for a long time. "They want to be seen," his tactical officer said. "They want to be counted," Pretosvin said from her station, and then immediately regretted speaking. But Dasek turned to her. "Explain." She hesitated. "Sir, 38 ships. They know we know exactly how many they have. They're not trying to bluff with numbers. They're presenting themselves exactly as they are. They're telling us they know we know, and they're showing up anyway." Dasek stared at her. "That's insane." "Yes, sir. No rational military command sends 38 ships against 47,000 as anything other than a gesture." "I don't think this is a gesture, sir." He turned back to the display. The human ship sat there, perfectly still, 11 light minutes away, not advancing, not transmitting, not doing anything except existing in a location that guaranteed they would be on every hegemony sensor at maximum resolution. "Then what is it?" he asked. Pretosvin looked at her screen. The translation matrix was pulling a fragment from an intercepted human communication, something sent between 2 of those ships 20 minutes ago. She read it, and the hair on the back of her neck, the untranslatable biological indicator that her species called *Velthari, meaning approximately the moment before a predator strikes, rose completely. She said, "Sir, I think it's a distraction." Nobody on the bridge moved for 3 full seconds. Then every sensor alarm in the ship went off simultaneously. Not weapons, not incoming fire, something else. Something the hegemony's sensor arrays were not calibrated to detect because nobody had thought to build a detection protocol for it, because nobody had ever done it before. 47,000 ships began to disappear from the tactical display. Not destroyed, not damaged, gone. One by one, then in clusters, then in cascading waves, the icons representing hegemony vessels simply ceased to be present on the display. The asterisk unbroken will asterisk was screaming in every direction for telemetry, for communication, for anything from its fleet, and getting back silence. Not the humans' organized silence, a different kind, the silence of presence removed. In 6 hours, 47,000 ships were gone. In the place they had been, there was nothing except the quiet of open space, and 11 light minutes away, 38 human ships, still sitting exactly where they had parked themselves, still not transmitting, still not moving. Still waiting. Dasek stood in the center of a bridge that had gone completely still, surrounded by officers who had stopped performing their functions, because their functions had stopped mattering, and he stared at the tactical display showing him a sphere of empty space where the largest armada in galactic history had been, and he said one word. Hell. This is where Commodore Velsareth's investigation began. Not with the loss. The hegemony had accepted the loss as a physical fact within hours. Once enough sensor buoys confirmed there was simply nothing left to find. What she was investigating was the how asterisk, the asterisk when asterisk, and the question she would not form for another 3 days. When did the humans know we were coming? The investigation had 4 researchers and access to every intercepted human communication from the previous 17 months. They worked in a sealed room on a station at the edge of the contested systems, and they did not sleep much. On day 3, Velsareth's junior analyst found the timestamp. Commodore, he spoke carefully, the way people speak when they're holding something that might explode. I found a human communication from 16 months ago, before the fleet assembled, before the council vote. She looked up. That's not possible. I know. The council vote authorizing the Armada was classified at the highest possible level. I know. Nobody outside the inner chamber knew what was being considered. Commodore, he turned his screen toward her. They knew. 16 months ago, the humans were already talking about what they were going to do when we arrived, not if asterisk, when. She stared at the screen. The intercepted communication was short. It was addressed from someone listed only as asterisk director, Project Lighthouse, to a list of recipients that included, she would later determine, every senior figure in the Terran Defense Command. It said, Phase 1 is authorized. Clock starts now. They don't know we know, keep it that way. Velsareth read this 3 times. Then she asked the question she should have asked on day 1. How did they know? Her analyst pulled up the next document. That's the second problem, he said, because I don't think this was intelligence. I think, he stopped. Say it. I think they predicted it. I think they looked at hegemony expansion patterns, political pressure cycles, and council decision timelines, and they calculated that this was coming. Not that it might come, that it would asterisk come, and they started preparing 16 months before we did. The room was very quiet. The 38 ships, Velsareth said slowly. Weren't their whole fleet, no. Where was the rest of it? Her analyst pulled up a star chart. He pointed to 17 locations in the asteroid belt, then to 43 additional locations distributed throughout the outer system, then to 6 locations she didn't immediately recognize until she checked the registry and realized they were deep space positions, completely outside the system, occupying coordinates that the hegemony's approach path had brought the Armada directly through. Directly through. They were asterisk inside the sphere asterisk, she said. The words felt wrong in her mouth, like speaking in a language she was only partially fluent in. Before we arrived, they were already inside the formation perimeter. Not 38 ships, her analyst said. We found communication signatures consistent with approximately 800. The number landed in the room like something physical. 800 ships. Hidden inside the asteroid belt, inside the system's navigational hazard zones, and she looked at the outer system positions again, her stomach dropping, scattered throughout the deep space corridor the Armada had spent 6 weeks traveling through. "They let us come to them," she said. "Yes." "They let 47,000 ships enter the formation perimeter. And then they removed them." "Yes." "How?" Not a question this time. A statement of total incomprehension. Her analyst had no answer. Neither did the rest of her team. The weapons' signatures left in the debris field, and there was a debris field, microscopic but present. Distributed across 11 light-minutes of space, matched no hegemony technology and no coalition technology, and nothing in any intelligence archive going back 4 centuries. What they matched was human patent filings from 8 years ago for a theoretical weapon system that every hegemony physics review board had assessed as *interesting but non-functional*. The humans had spent 8 years building something that the hegemony's best physicists had said couldn't work. Then they'd said nothing about it. For 8 years. On day 7 of the investigation, they found Pretosvin's log. It had been transmitted, intact, to a human intelligence contact. The how of that was its own investigation, one that would take 3 years and still not produce complete answers. But the log itself was there, time-stamped, every entry preserved, and Velsareth sat alone in the sealed room and read it from beginning to end. She read the entry about the jokes. She read the entry about the silence being something being built. She read the line, "I don't think this is a gesture, sir," and felt the specific pain of watching someone who understood something be ignored by everyone around them. The last entry in Pretosvin's log was dated to 6 hours after the Armada disappeared. It was short. "They gave us 46 hours of the 48. They waited until we were completely inside before they engaged. They could have done it earlier. I've been thinking about why they waited, and I think I know. They wanted to give us time to call it off. They gave us 46 hours to decide not to do this. We didn't call it off. I don't know what happened to the fleet. I don't know if they're dead or if they're somewhere else. I hope they're somewhere else. I think the humans might be the kind of species that would consider killing 47,000 people a bad outcome even if those 47,000 were coming to threaten them. I have been wrong about many things on this assignment. I do not think I am wrong about that." Velsareth put the log down. She looked at the star chart on the wall. She thought about the buoy still transmitting, still cycling that sound that her team had called *deliberate, and she thought about what it meant for a species to wait 46 hours before acting. What it cost them. What it said about them. She opened a new communication channel and began composing a report for the Grand Council. She had written 3 sentences when her analyst's voice came through the intercom. "Commodore, we found them." She stopped typing, "The fleet." "Yes." "Dead." A pause, long enough that she stood up. "No," he said. "Alive, all of them. 47,000 ships, crews intact, deposited at coordinates approximately 4 light-years from the contested systems." Another pause. "They were placed inside a navigable transit lane with enough fuel to reach the nearest hegemony station." Velsareth did not speak for a very long time. "Commodore, there's a message attached, addressed to Fleet Admiral Dasek." "Read it." She heard papers, physical papers, the human habit of printing communications that the hegemony found archaic and charming, rustling on his end. He read, "Fleet Admiral Dasek, your crew members are unharmed. Your ships have been resupplied. You will find enclosed a complete technical summary of Project Lighthouse, as we see no further advantage in concealing it. We kept the 47,000 lives because we want to be clear that we were never interested in killing them. We were interested in making a specific point. If you would like to discuss the 11 contested systems, we are available for dialogue at your convenience. We should tell you, in the interest of transparency, that we have 3 additional Project Lighthouse installations already operational and 11 more in construction. We look forward to hearing from you. Admiral Chen, Terran Defense Command. P.S. The buoy is a gift. It's playing a recording of the ocean near our largest naval academy. We thought you might like to know what it feels like to stand at the edge of something you don't fully understand. The Grand Council convened 11 days later. Velsareth testified for 6 hours. She answered every question she could answer and was honest about the questions she couldn't. She described Project Lighthouse in the technical terms she understood, which were incomplete. She described the timeline, 16 months. The document reading clock starts now, and watched the council members absorb it at different speeds, some immediately, some slowly, some not at all. She described Pretosvin's log. She was asked if Pretosvin would be charged with negligence for failing to escalate her concerns more forcefully. No, Velsareth said. She escalated 3 times. She was told to recalibrate her instruments. The failure was not hers. There was a long debate about this. It was the wrong debate to be having, and she knew it, but she let it run because it was taking the council toward the question they were all afraid to ask directly. Eventually, Councillor Methdarov asked it. He was the oldest member of the council and had the particular quality of very old political figures who have outlived their fear of embarrassment. He said, "Commodore, in your assessment, not your technical assessment, your asterisk assessment, why did they give the fleet back?" The chamber went quiet. Velsareth had been waiting for this question. She had written several answers to it in her personal notes and crossed them all out. Because killing 47,000 people was not the point, she said, and because they understood that if they killed 47,000 people, the next armada we sent would be larger and they would have to do it again and again until one side was completely gone. They did not want that outcome, so they chose a different one. They showed mercy, Methdarov said. No, sir. Velsareth paused. She had rehearsed this part. They showed calculation. Those are different things. A species that shows mercy does so from a position of moral feeling. A species that calculates mercy, she stopped, restarted. They weren't being kind. They were being precise asterisk. They wanted a specific outcome, continued existence, recognized sovereignty, an end to the territorial pressure. And they identified the exact minimum force required to produce that outcome without creating a cycle they couldn't control. Killing 47,000 would have been imprecise, so they didn't. The council debated for 3 more hours. The debate that mattered, the one that would reshape hegemony policy for the next century, happened in a smaller room afterward with fewer people, and Velsareth was not there for most of it. She was in a corridor outside, standing next to a window that looked out at open space, thinking about the buoy. Still transmitting. She'd been told it was still transmitting. The ocean. The sound of the ocean on a planet 400 light-years away, broadcast into empty space as a gift to whatever species came looking. What it feels like to stand at the edge of something you don't fully understand. She thought about Pretosvin's note. The word she'd used, afraid asterisk. I don't understand why they're not afraid. That scares me more than anything else. Velsareth understood it now. Or she understood it well enough to know that understanding it completely was probably not possible for her. The humans hadn't been unafraid. That was the misreading. Pretosvin had seen the jokes, the organized silence. The 38 ships presented like a deliberate undercount and read it as the absence of fear. It wasn't. It was fear fully acknowledged, completely incorporated, and then set aside not because it had been resolved, but because the humans had looked at what terrified them and decided to keep moving anyway. The jokes were how they moved. The silence was how they built. The 38 ships were how they communicated. We see you. We see how large you are. We're here regardless. That was the thing the hegemony's models didn't have a category for. Every civilization in the coalition's history, when confronted with overwhelming force, had processed fear through one of three frameworks: negotiation, retreat, or symbolic resistance. The humans had done something none of those frameworks described. They had looked at the fear, understood it precisely, and then used it as asterisk fuel. 16 months of fuel, burning quietly in asteroid belts and deep space corridors, powering a weapon that the galaxy's best physicists had said couldn't work, until it worked well enough to remove 47,000 ships from a battlefield without killing a single person. They'd been afraid the whole time. That's what had made them so dangerous. The technical summary in Admiral Chen's message took 4 years to fully decode, not because the humans had encrypted it, they hadn't, but because portions of it described physics that the hegemony's scientific community had to develop new frameworks to even articulate. The Project Lighthouse weapon, which the humans called in their characteristic fashion something almost insultingly casual. The Shoal Drive Mark IV did not destroy ships. It displaced them. It created a temporary topological fold in local space, moved everything within a defined radius through that fold, and deposited it elsewhere, intact. The humans had invented a weapon that couldn't kill. Or rather, they had invented a weapon capable of killing anything within its radius, and they had spent 4 additional years modifying it specifically so that it didn't. The Mark I through Mark II had been fully lethal. They'd scrapped all 3 versions. The engineering notes, which were included in the summary, and which a hegemony physicist named Reth Kalev would spend the rest of her career studying, contained a single annotation at the transition point between Mark III and Mark IV that read, "We needed to work without killing them, start over. Not asterisk, we want asterisk, we need." Reth Kalev wrote in her analysis, "The humans appear to have treated the non-lethal requirement as a constraint equivalent in importance to the weapon's functional requirements. They were not willing to build a version that worked if that version also killed. This is not morality. This is design philosophy. They designed a weapon around the principle that the victory condition included the survival of the enemy. I do not know what to call this. My colleagues suggest restraint. I think that is wrong. Restraint implies withholding capacity that exists. The humans built the capacity from the ground up to include the survival of the target. That is not restraint. That is something I don't have a word for yet." The paper was published. It generated 247 response papers from across the coalition's member civilizations. None of them found a better word. Admiral Chen retired 2 years after the incident. Her retirement ceremony, which was broadcast publicly, was attended by approximately 800 million people across the 11 contested systems. Systems which, following 18 months of negotiations, had been reclassified as jointly administered territories under a framework that essentially gave the humans everything they'd asked for in the original diplomatic exchanges before the Armada. Before the politely worded refusals. Chen was 63 years old at her retirement. She was asked in her final public interview whether she had been afraid. She laughed, not a small diplomatic laugh, a genuine full laugh that lasted several seconds. "Every day," she said, "every single day for 16 months." The interviewer, a young journalist who had not been born when the Armada arrived, asked, "Then how?" Chen looked at him for a moment. The way she looked suggested she had been asked this question many times and had never quite found the answer that fit. "You know what the hardest part was," she said. "It wasn't building the Shoal Drive. Our engineers are extraordinary. Give them an impossible problem and enough time and they'll solve it. That's just who they are. The hardest part was the 46 hours. "Waiting," the journalist said. "Waiting," she agreed. "Knowing they were inside the perimeter. Knowing we could have ended it in the first hour. Sitting with that for 46 hours, watching the clock, watching my senior staff slowly losing their minds and holding. Because we needed it to be undeniable. We needed 47,000 witnesses who could go home and report exactly what had happened. If we'd acted in the first hour, there would have been questions, ambiguity, alternative explanations." She shook her head. 46 hours gave us a complete record. Every ship logged, every position confirmed, every communication archived. 46 hours turned a military action into an argument that was impossible to dispute. Were you confident it would work? Another pause, longer this time. The Shoal Drive, yes. By month 14 we were confident enough. The physics were solid. She looked away from the camera for a moment towards something off-screen that the broadcast didn't capture. But the other part, the part where we gave them back, I wasn't confident that would work. I was afraid they'd see it as weakness. I was afraid the council would look at 47,000 returned crew members and think we'd made a mistake, that we should have pressed harder. What made you do it anyway? Chen turned back to the camera. She had the specific quality that very few people have, the quality of someone who had been afraid of something enormous and had not let it stop them, and who carried that history visibly without performing it. Because the point was never to win, she said. The point was to stop asterisk. Winning and stopping are different things. Winning means there's a loser and losers tend to come back. Stopping means everybody walks away with something. They get their fleet. We get our systems. Nobody's debt is catastrophic enough to create a cycle. She paused. We didn't want a victory. We wanted a conversation. The Shoal Drive was just the only way we could figure out how to make them willing to have one. The interview ended shortly after. The journalist wrote in his published piece that Chen had seemed satisfied but not proud, the specific expression of someone who had done something necessary that they never wanted to do again. Velsarath read that interview from a hospital room on a hegemony station near the border of the jointly administered systems. She was recovering from surgery, a routine procedure, nothing related to the investigation, and she had too much time and not enough to do with it. She read the interview twice. Then she opened the file she had kept on her personal terminal for 2 years. The file contained, in its entirety, a single audio clip, a recording she had requested from the communications archive before the buoy was finally decommissioned. The ocean. She had listened to it perhaps 40 times in 2 years. She did not fully understand why. There was something in it that resisted complete comprehension, and she found herself returning to it the way you return to a piece of art that means something you can't articulate. She played it once more in the hospital room, the sound of water moving over itself endlessly on a planet she had never visited and probably never would. Rhythmic, massive, patient. It didn't know anything. It wasn't trying to tell her anything. It was just water doing what water did, on a world where one particular species of upright, soft-bodied, terrifyingly creative mammals had looked at the largest armada in galactic history and decided collectively that they were going to solve the problem without creating a larger one. They'd been afraid the whole time. They'd built anyway. They'd waited 46 hours with the weapon armed and the target acquired, because they decided that 46 hours of their own terror was worth more than certainty, because it would make the argument undeniable. They'd given back 47,000 lives because killing them would have been imprecise. They'd spent 4 years redesigning a functional weapon because the functional version killed people, and they needed it not to. She thought about Reth Kalev's paper, the word she couldn't find. Velsarath thought she might have it now, or something close. The humans hadn't restrained themselves. They hadn't shown mercy. They hadn't calculated the minimum necessary force in any framework she recognized from military theory. They had looked at every possible outcome, found the one they could live with, and then paid whatever it cost to reach it. Whatever it cost in time, in fear, in years of silent work in asteroid belts, in 46 hours of sitting with a weapon armed and their hands in their laps. The word was not restraint. The word was *choice*. They had chosen. At every point where another civilization would have been forced into a response by circumstance, by fear, by the logic of escalation, the humans had paused and chosen. Built a weapon that couldn't kill. Waited 46 hours they didn't have to wait. given back a fleet they didn't have to give back. Chose. And they had been afraid every single time. She lay in the hospital room and listened to the ocean and thought, this is the most terrifying thing about them. Not that they're brave, not that they're smart, not that they built something we said couldn't work. That they can be completely, correctly, rationally terrified of something. And still choose. The audio clip ran to its end. The hospital room was quiet. Velsareth stared at the ceiling and thought about the buoy, spinning in a slow ellipse around nothing, broadcasting the sound of water moving on a world 400 light-years away. They had left it there on purpose, that much was certain. But she understood now what *on purpose meant. It wasn't a warning, and it wasn't a taunt, and it wasn't a gift in any simple sense. It was a demonstration, not of power, not of capability, of patience, of how long they were willing to wait, of what it felt like to stand at the edge of something massive and rhythmic and indifferent to your presence, something that had been doing what it did long before you arrived and would continue long after, and realize that you had been thinking about this wrong from the very beginning. The ocean didn't care about the Armada. The ocean had been there the whole time. It would be there long after the Armada, and the hegemony and the Grand Council and every flag planted in every system had become the kind of ancient history that young species looked back at and struggled to understand. The humans knew this about themselves. That was the last thing she realized, lying in the hospital room in the quiet, and it was the thing that settled into her chest and stayed there, permanent and unresolvable, the weight of a truth you can't unfind once you've found it. They knew they were temporary. They knew everything they built would eventually be dust. They knew the ocean would outlast them and the stars would outlast the ocean. They built anyway. They chose anyway. They were afraid anyway every day, and they kept going. That was not a military capability. That was not a technological advantage. That was not a strategic doctrine that could be studied and replicated and defended against. That was something older than any of those things, and it had no name in any language Velsareth knew, and she suspected lying still in the quiet, listening to nothing, thinking about a sound she'd already heard 40 times, that the humans probably had a word for it. They had a word for everything they decided